Hello, and welcome to the Dental Marketing Mastery Series. This podcast is brought to you by New Patients Incorporated. I'm Howie, the founder of New Patients Incorporated, and along with me once again is my friend and partner and the president of New Patients Incorporated, Mark Dilitush. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome once again to the Dental Marketing Mastery Series podcast. I'm here.
Hello, Howie.
Yeah, how you doing, Mark?
Good.
Well, here we go. What are we talking about today? We are talking about wildly successful dentists and their habits.
Yes.
Yeah.
This came to us actually after my interview with Marv Berlin, who's probably one of the most successful dentists out there.
Yeah.
And other dentists were listening to that podcast, and then they got onto our Facebook Marketing Mastery page group, and they started asking me direct questions. It started to get a little crazy. So we said, well, let's create some podcasts. We think this will only be maybe one or two in a series, but let's start a series of podcasts based on the practices that dentists see who are wildly successful at promoting themselves. And what habits do those dentists have? Because you can learn from them, right?
Yeah.
So that's where we're starting. We're starting with the idea that everybody who's listening to this podcast right now knows of a dentist or dentists near them who appear to be anyway wildly successful at promoting their practice. They grow at a nice, slow, steady pace, and they seemingly, have their practice is filled with good patients. So how do those dentists do that? What are those dentists' habits? And you kind of have to have a practice management background and practice marketing expertise in order to come up with all these things that we're going to list out, the habits of these successful dentists. So here we go. I think the first thing that a really successful dentist, because in order to be successful at marketing, you pretty much have to understand what messaging, what branding, how do you want the local community to view your practice, whether they are a patient or not. You better have that in your head. And then how do you get that out to the masses consistently without too many disappointments? So expectations is really reasonable expectations. So let's summarize this piece of it. The most wildly successful marketing dentists have reasonable expectations.
Right.
They don't open a practice in downtown Houston, which is a 1 to 500, and expect 150 high quality new patients a month, because they're just going to continually be disappointed, and probably get out of dentistry, because that's never going to happen.
That's a very, very key point right there from the get-go is, what do you have to do? What's your task? Climb Mount Everest, or, is it going to be just a bunny hill, right?
Exactly.
And that's dentist population ratio right there.
Right.
Very important.
Right. So the most successful dentists have reasonable expectations. So let's go through the expectations. The market that I'm in is a 1 to X market, 1 to 1,500, 1 to 3,000, 1 to 500. If it's a low number, it's going to take you a lot more time, a lot more effort, and a lot more money, and you're going to have to do everything right in order to penetrate, a 1 to 1,000 market on a continual, consistent basis. It just is. And then the higher the number, the more mistakes you can make, honestly. Okay. And the faster you can grow a dental practice. So if you're in a 1 to 3,000 market, then you can take a flyer on a couple things. You can be wrong with your messaging once or twice, and you'll still be just fine, because the demand for dental services in a 1 to 3,000 market obviously is much higher than a national average 1 to 1,650. So understanding what's around you and having reasonable expectations for penetrating that market is really the first step to being a wildly successful marketing dentist. Because if you're, and we see this all the time, the dentists will try this, they'll get disappointed, right? Then they'll try that, and then they'll be disappointed.
Right.
And then they'll try this, and then they'll try this other thing, and then they'll go to a CE course somewhere, and they'll try this shiny object over here. And, it's like, is after a while, they get so disappointed they just keep piling disappointment on top of disappointment. And they basically come away saying nothing works.
Well, yeah. And you and I know, we talked about this before, the bell curve of any advertising piece or program that you're involved in. And the problem with dentists trying this for a little while and trying that is that they continually restart the bell curve.
Exactly.
So they're always incurring all of those expenses, which usually all of them come at the beginning, and they don't give it long enough to receive the benefit of the ascending bell curve and the flattening out of the bell curve, and they get disappointed. Like you said, they give up.
Well, they give up, they bail, and honestly, let's be real about this. There are advertising mediums and advertising deliveries that you should bail on. Okay, and there's let's face it. If it's not working, it's not working. You shouldn't just keep throwing bad money on top of bad money. All right, but if your expectations are within reasonable limits of what a human being can achieve, and that human being or human beings achieve within that range, then chances are you found something that works really, really, really well, and probably will for an extended period of time. So let's review. What's the first trait of these wildly successful dentists who market their practices? And the answer is they have reasonable expectations. What's another expectation of those dentists? How about everything I do won't necessarily work?
Yes, right.
Here's another one. Everything works together. So that as I build out my marketing footprint in my market, and I get my website, and I start on local optimization, maybe I start on organic optimization, maybe I have an offline campaign, maybe I start some Google ads. As I continue to build out this footprint, build this moat around my practice, that it becomes like a pile. You just keep piling marketing investment, good marketing investment on top of good marketing investment on top of good marketing investment. You don't go out of budget. Just keep doing it the right way every year, over year. And my goodness, if you have reasonable expectations and there's 6 or 7 things working for you, it's okay if one of the 5 or 6 stops working. You can just move that money to a different direction.
Right.
There's almost infinite places to put advertising dollars, right?
Yeah. It's like playing the piano. You can press a bunch of different keys. So
exactly. So, which kind of brings us to our next trait of wildly successful dentists who market their practices, and that is data. Specifically,
oh, yes,
result data. Okay. So remember, we started with expectations. So if you have a range of expectations, which are within a range that someone can meet or exceed, and they meet or exceed it, you're going to want to know, within reason, it's not going to be 100% accurate, but within reason, you're going to want to know, hey, what's my first year ROI on a new patient? What's the first year revenue on a new patient? What are my marketing costs? What are my budgets?
Yeah, what am I getting for what I'm putting out?
What am I getting? Okay, and we can dovetail into the next quality of a wildly successful dentist. But what is my ROI? How do I track my ROI? And knowing how to track your ROI properly stops a dentist from being disappointed, okay? And stops a dentist from asking for wild, unattainable, ridiculous results when nobody on the earth could possibly provide them.
Yeah.
Right?
Right. This might be a good point here, Mark. Take a little break, and then we'll come back and talk more about
you got it.
Tracking and data. Okay? We'll be right back. Do you know the difference between a shopper and a high-quality new patient? If you know the difference and want a consistent way to attract the latter to your dental practice, you now know why we have practices who have been with us for decades. Shh, don't tell your buddy down the street. Go to newpatientsinc.com, click Get Started. We will build a plan to attract those patients into your practice. All right, we are back. Thank you all again for listening. We're talking about wildly successful dentists and their traits and habits and so forth. And we were just about ready to get into the feedback that you all need.
Yeah, the data.
Data.
I'm here. It really boils down to this. I'm spending money. I want to know what my spend is getting me. It really boils down to that.
Right.
And the most successful dentists, they basically demand to know. Okay. They understand how to measure ROI. They understand that, it's a dental practice. The ROI doesn't happen the first month. Okay. They're smart enough to know that. But they also want to see the data as it happens. They want to see the calls. They want to coordinate the caller with their practice management software. They want to run their production by referral source reports at the end of every month or so. They want to see the ROI build for the spend as it happens. They want to make sure, darn sure, that their team is handling the phones, answering the phones during normal business hours, or at least during the hours that most dental consumers expect the phone to be answered. They demand that their team answer those phones properly and convert a reasonable, not wild, a reasonable percentage of those calls into new patients. They want all these things and they demand all these things in front of them whenever they want them. And they should have them. They should be able to just go on a browser and go, click. That's how my marketing's done.
Right. A dashboard, in other words, right?
Right. That's right. Because if you don't have that, remember, these are wildly successful dentists who market their own practices. Okay. So if you don't have that, what ends up happening is that doubt, the uncertainty, mistrust, I don't know what I'm getting, stress, those feelings start to creep in. Like, I don't know what's going on with my SEO. I don't know what's going on with my PPC campaign. Whatever it is that you're spending marketing dollars on, believe me, the first thing that you're wondering every morning when you wake up and drive to your dental practice is, hey, I wonder if my marketing's working. Okay. Well, you should know that before you start your car.
Exactly.
That shouldn't be an uncertainty. And I can't tell you how vitally important this piece of it is. because it's going to lend itself to the next big important trait of wildly successful dentists who market their own practices. The next trait is understanding the data, understanding that their teams are not perfect. Nobody has a perfect team. Being aware that they really do need phone coverage from 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, even though they might not work one or even two of those days during the week, they still need somebody to cover the phones. And making sure those people and being devoted to the process, the training maybe that's necessary, and making sure those people who are answering the phones are calling the callers back who may have called during the day and got the voicemail. They're covering with a human being their lunchtimes. That's the one that's a killer. Lunchtime.
Yeah.
They're covering that one day a week when they're not in the practice at all. Right? I mean, there's 25% ROI growth. And the most successful dentists who do their own marketing, they pay attention to all those details. They have it in the dashboard in front of them, and the details, if they're weak in any of these areas, the weakness screams off of these dashboards, and then the doctor can go take action. Well, of course, there's dentists out there who maybe don't want to bring up that Sally's answering the phone improperly to Sally. Maybe they're unprepared to do that. Okay. Well, the most successful dentists who are promoting their own practices do get Sally training. That's what I'm saying. The uncomfort of the potential conflict of getting their staff up to speed and trained properly is much less than just burning money. You're literally taking hundreds of dollars of bills in a Bic lighter and you're just lighting them on fire, using them as kindling. Right. If these things aren't taken care of. Well, and again, go ahead.
I was just going to say, well, in a sense, you could say that Sally or whoever it is the most important person in the practice. Now you could say, well, what about the dentist? Without the dentist, no dentistry gets done. True, but without somebody skillfully answering the phone and dealing with patients who call in, without that key function, there's no patients. Right? So there's no patients to do any dentistry on. So this is vital. It's vital.
Right, and the most successful dentists look at this part of it. They don't look at it as an evil necessity. They look at it as, well, of course. They almost look at it like they say, well, of course I'm going to have my phones answered, and of course I'm going to get my staff the training they need. I'd be crazy to spend this much money on marketing, even though it's within the 5% range. I'm not going to spend this money on marketing unless I have that stuff squared away, and unless I can monitor it quickly and easily. Of course I want all that in place. That's how they look at it. They don't look at it to avoid it. They don't look at it as if it's going to create a conflict. They don't look at it like I'm going to be afraid if my staff knows that I'm, recording these calls. They don't. That's the last thing from their mind. The first thing from their mind is, how do I maximize my marketing spend? That's how they actually look at it.
Yeah.
Okay, so we are expectations, data, staff, and the idea that here's the bottom line. The most important trait, really, honestly, between, for all the dentists who are wildly successful marketing in their own practice, is that whoever they use for a marketing company, doesn't have to be NPI, it could be anybody, but for whoever they use to do their marketing stuff for them, it's a partnership. They don't look at this as, okay, marketing company, here's my marketing budget. I'm just going to sit back, do nothing, change nothing, monitor nothing, watch nothing. And I'm going to expect you to improve your results. And if you don't, I'm going to go out and get another marketing company next year.
Yeah.
And again, those who do that, and there's lots of dentists, there's probably tens of thousands of dentists who do that. Okay. Those dentists tend to be more stressed. They're not nearly as happy as the dentists who, have the same marketing firm year over year, over year, over year, over year, over year, the same people, the same relationships, excuse me. Those dentists are a little bit behind the eight ball. So let's review for this podcast. Reasonable expectations. You can't expect anyone, yourself or anybody else, to pull Sasquatch out of a hat. Rabbit, yeah. And consistently, yes. You have reasonable expectations for where you practice and what type of patients you're going after. If you're going after a bunch of shoppers, you're going to get volume and lower revenues. If you're going to go after people who don't choose a dentist based on price, you're going to get less volume and a much higher ROI. And those are just facts. Those are just realities. Okay. Your expectations have to be managed within there based on how the market is, what market you serve, and we can measure that. Anyway, then demanding to be able to see what's going on with your marketing, the calls, listening to them, who's answering them, what was the result, all that stuff, being able to monitor it without hardly any overhead on your part or on the dentist's part. Almost all wildly successful dentists who do their own marketing have some system that allows them to do that. Otherwise, it becomes a ridiculous overhead and they just tire of monitoring it. Then covering the phones, not only covering them, but covering them with capable people and being devoted to not only getting the current folks you have on staff trained, but maybe redoing or refreshing that training once every so often. It doesn't have to be constant, but making sure that the office is doing the very best job it can. And again, watching the improvement on that result dashboard, right? So you can invest in the training and then see the results of that training in real time. At the very end, all those traits is really the setup for another list of probably 10 to 15 traits that we'll go into with a future podcast. But take these as just as important. Actually, these are foundational traits of wildly successful dentists who are doing their own marketing. I don't know anyone, because we've had clients who, they're not wildly successful at doing marketing. But we have a boatload who are wildly successful at doing marketing. So we're pulling traits from those people and we're just sharing them with you. And we're not saying that
we pay attention to our dashboard.
Exactly.
Too.
We're not saying it's all your fault. We're just saying, look, these are the secrets. This is what they do that sets them like way ahead. They don't stress at all. They know exactly what's coming down the pipe. And honestly, they can call and prepare for what they want to come down the pipe. So if they want to go fee for service, they can call. If they want more volume because they hired an associate, they can call. So they know, after a while, obviously, they know what to expect. They know what's coming down the pipe and they can see what's coming down the pipe. So this podcast was all about that foundation.
All right.
All those things is really where you start.
Yep. Very good. Well, that'll do it for us today. We surely appreciate your listening to us, and we hope you'll tune in again next time. Bye now. We hope you've enjoyed our podcast today. You can get all of our podcasts on iTunes, Stitcher, and Libsyn.com, and on our website, newpatientsinc.com.